everybody, I'm so glad you're back. We are going to be working on another painting from the past. Although this week, for a surprise, I am going to have a reference photo. The past couple of ones, there has been enough information and just some changes, especially like last week I had the sketch that I showed you how to drop trees around and to create kind of a fun little path. This week though, we're going to be working on a sunset image. Now the sunset image that is my beginning painting, the painting from the past, is very basic, and here it is. This is a very typical piece from back whenever I was cranking out maybe 4 or 5 of these little 5x5s, maybe a 6x6 every day. And you can see here that it's on 400 grit UArt, and I toned the paper. This is before UArt Dark was a thing, and I painted the paper with some thinned black acrylic paint. Now, this painting really doesn't have a lot going for it, other than I do kind of like the color of the sky, and it does have good value. My trees are nice and dark. My sky has a nice pretty glow. I'm kind of unsure. I don't remember if this is supposed to be snow or if it's a water feature. I'm not really sure. But it also is, of course, very centered. And my trees have some little pokey tree holes in them, sky holes, that aren't really working. Now for this week, since I really wanted to recreate a sunset image for you, I didn't want to go off of this one because this one just really doesn't have a lot of information. And usually with clouds, you kind of need something to go off of. And so I was driving around with my husband the other day, and there was this beautiful purple and orange sunset. Of course, I live in the Texas Panhandle. We have the prettiest skies in the world. And as he was driving, I was in the passenger seat and I leaned across of him to snap a picture so I could paint it for you guys. And so this week we are going to have a reference photo, and this is the piece we're actually going to work on. Let me turn the camera. There it is. This is the painting that we're going to be going off of. You'll notice that my horizon line is very low. Whenever I'm doing any kind of dramatic clouds, I love to have that very low, dark horizon line with those silhouetted trees. We're going to be working on building form in our clouds, and it's also a pretty quick painting. So I'm excited for you guys to watch it. Please let me know what you think, and let's get started. Okay, everybody, I have a piece of 9x12 UArt. I marked the middle just to reiterate, familiarize myself with the painting. And I also am making my low horizon line. And you can see I'm making quite a bit bigger shapes of trees than are actually in that reference photo. There are trees in that reference photo. They're just really, really far away. And I like the original painting in that there is some form to the landscape. Sometimes whenever especially where I live, where we just have lots of flat land and then this gorgeous sky, I like to add something to relate to the sky a little bit, and so that's why I make the trees a little bigger. First of all, I'm going to be looking at this reference and noticing the dark blues that are in the upper reaches of the sky, and then how, towards the horizon line, that's where the sunset was and is. The sun is setting there, and so of course it's going to be brighter and more colorful. But my main goal right now is to establish the deep, dark bases of these clouds. We have to think of clouds as having form. They're not just colorful stripes of flat 2D ribbons in our sky. They have form, and a lot of times that form can actually be very dark. So I like to, similarly to doing, anything that I do in the landscape, I like to work dark to light. I applied some kind of a cool, I'm not sure of the number of that new pastel that is blue that you see there, and also a grayed down version of a purple. That was, I believe, a unison. I'm swiping that in. This is a flat glazing brush because it really moves around the pastel just so I can form the base of my clouds. I'm also trying to just push this color to tone the paper within a shape versus just toning the whole paper in general. And then I'll be applying the lighter and brighter hues on top once this dries. I am using 91% isopropyl alcohol. In other countries, you call it surgical spirits. It just dries really quickly. If you aren't using UART sanded paper, then I would test a strip of your paper just to make sure that it doesn't remove the grit too much. Okay, so now what I'm doing, the paper has dried, and I am reapplying the same base colors on top of my toned paper. This just helps float the pastel a little bit off of, the other pigment that I basically created paint with and melted into the paper. I have plenty of tooth here. That's what the alcohol wash does. It just really creates that thin wash of paint. And I like to, mainly right now I'm trying to kind of cover the color of the paper, that oatmeal creamy yellow. I don't want that to show through into my sunset. And so I am just reapplying those same two colors, that dark blue new pastel that I'm going to find the number on, and also the purple unison. I'm going right back in areas where I didn't really quite get enough of that underpainting color down to wash in, or if I want to specifically darken an area, you can go back in multiple times with alcohol. As long as you kind of let it dry between passes, it shouldn't affect your paper in a negative way. So now I'm going to start lightening, especially the edges of the clouds. Where the clouds are a little bit thinner and the sky color is showing through that soft edge, I'm going to be using a little bit of a lighter value. You can see that's lighter than that new pastel that I used for my underpainting, working my way up, instead of just immediately going in to that bright blue sky value. That's going to help the just that variation and the shift be just a little more gentle. I often will go back in with the new pastel, especially. It's a great blending tool. And so if any of those values stick out a little bit too much, or I think that I've kind of lost a dark value, you can just go right back in with that hard pastel. Kind of works as a blending tool and just glazing those colors together. A little bit lighter here, just softly whisking that pastel across the page. I have not sped this video up at all. I am working very quickly, and this is a really quick painting. It comes together in about 15 minutes. This helps me just have a looseness and a painterly style, working fast, not overthinking, really just looking at the major shapes and the values within those shapes. For those of you new to my Patreon page that haven't seen me paint a sunset or a very dynamic sky image, I prefer to work from top to bottom and really leave the foreground for last. Since we're working in pastel, there's always a little bit of excess that drops down the page and kind of sticks to the paper. And whenever if I worked all over the page, working on the bottom, that lighter color of pastel would stick to that darker value. And so in order for me to just reduce my load of work and not have to redo something over and over, I save the foreground for the ending. Sometimes that means you can't really tell, you don't have any dark value to be a good contrast to the rest of the painting. Sometimes you can't really see the whole piece come together until the final just mark of dark at the bottom, which I kind of like. It's almost like revealing let's look behind curtain number 3 and see what it is. It's kind of the same thing. It's this really magical element that is really just fun to do. I've been painting with some different mauve and purple new pastels here to help start bringing some form to these clouds. Usually what's nearer to you is going to be warmer, and what's further away is going to be cooler. The same goes for clouds. You can see that the clouds in the reference photo, they have rounded edges, even though it's a pretty flat shape in the sky. Obviously this cloud was really long and low. So I'm working on building that form and building those shapes. There I just took a towel that I have this towel in my studio that sometimes I just pick up and I just swipe. I kind of like the marks it makes. It almost looks like you just took a big paintbrush and made some big bold strokes. This is a Terry Ludwig that I bought at IAPS. It's a new color. You can see that it's a very, very dark mauve, and how in that cloud that I'm working on at the top, it is not as vibrant as the horizon line, and it's really important whenever you're painting a sunset. You don't want to be too garish. Sometimes, yes, that photograph looks garish, but it is also a photograph. Sometimes a painting that is that bright just almost looks like a cartoon. And so you have to be really, really careful, especially in the beginning, not to put something down that's too bright. I'm using very neutral-ish tones here. I like to call them my ish colors. Yes, they have a hue. They're not technically neutrals, or more like beige or taupe, or things that are hard to describe as a color. This is a peach color, but it's a very grayed down peach. This is a Terry Ludwig that I'm using right now. You can see that I'm working my way down the painting. Also putting in just some hints of some brighter colors at the top. And then softening those edges a little bit with some new pastel, using that new pastel as a blender. Adding in some cool greens here, really just still building, having fun with my palette. Also going to start bringing in a little bit of brighter value. This is a Rembrandt, a pink Rembrandt. You can see whenever you add, whenever you're layering these colors together, the brighter, warmer colors come out at you. They pop out, while that distant, darker, more purple cloud base that we painted is in the background. I'm working a little bit. There's some dark blue kind of stripes in those clouds, and also the paper color is a little too bright down there at the bottom. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to take this Richardson that is this really gorgeous orange and just swipe it across. This is also considered, to me, the base darkest value of the orange that I'm going to use. I'm going to actually be applying some brighter oranges, but I need to start off with a little darker orange at first. I don't want to push this too quickly into something that's too bright. I'm just going to push that into the paper a little bit with some pipe foam, whisking and flicking it around to help me with that wispy effect. And then I'm going to take just a purple new pastel and just kind of tap it in and over to soften that color a little bit. It's almost time for me to start applying the very dark ground base, which is going to help the whole piece kind of make sense. It's almost like last week whenever I started off with black paper. I needed to add that light value for it to make sense. Well, in this case, I need to add the dark value, and this right here is straight General's compressed charcoal. I'm going to push that in and paint it in with some rubbing alcohol, and then you'll see how I make my little tree shapes. Just using the brush, I'm just swiping that in, and then I'm going to push the brush up. I'm not using any additional paint at all. I'm just pushing the existing pigment, what I already put down, that charcoal, up into the sky over that distant horizon. Just really just kind of wiggling the brush around to make those loose tree shapes, almost like they're silhouetted by the sunset. taking out my favorite color of Great American. It's the beacon color. It's wonderful for skies. It's just a little bit of different temperature than your normal cobalt, ultramarine, or turquoise. And so it just looks really pretty in skies. I'm also going to lighten up the horizon slowly and gradually. So this is where I talked about I wanted a darker orange first, and then I'm working to a brighter orange. This is a Rembrandt. You can see that it's tiny because I've used it a lot. I really like Rembrandts. I like a harder pastel, especially for those very linear horizontal marks that I'm making. You can't really see it, but that's actually a very dark green Terry Ludwig. And then I'm going to apply just very gentle swipes of some dark blues to differentiate the grasses from the trees. This is going to help differentiate the field that is in the foreground, of course, from that distant tree line. Since I added some ultramarines down into the grasses, I want to add just a hint of ultramarine up there into the blue of the sky and the edges of those clouds. That just helps that color harmony make a little bit more sense. Now all it is just very, very subtle changes, very tiny, just grazing the pastel across the paper. And of course, I love my black tape, especially in this case. It's going to help especially the bottom part make a little bit more sense, just because it's going to take away that messy edge. And what I noticed, this black tape helps me notice things, is I think that that top blue sky is a little too bright. And so I'm toning it down a little bit, maybe adding just a little bit more harder detail into that tree line at the bottom, and that just helps the painting come together. I hope you enjoyed watching how I create a sunset piece. This one was really fun to paint for you. I have enjoyed this month so much. I hope you have too. So you guys just check in. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you're painting. I love to see it on Facebook and here on Patreon in our community page. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.